someone have succeeded to label people who, for example, are studying near-death experiences and bending metal, whatever. And if you are dealing with that as a scientist, you are doing pseudoscience.
Yeah. Pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience.
That's the word they're using.
Yeah. And using labeling people with words like these will end all discussion. And as a journalist, if you call one of these people with a label, then and make an interview with him, then you are contaminated with the same label.
Hi, everybody. This is Mind the Shift, and my name is Anders Bolling. Welcome to this first episode of 2022. I just want to say one thing before we begin my conversation with my first guest of this year, Jesper Madsen, namely that there was a slight technical issue once I had recorded this interview. When the file was converted, I realized that there was no video on me, only on my guest. So the only person who is live in this conversation is my guest, Jesper Madsen. And when I'm speaking, you will see stills of me. So if you wonder why that is, this is the explanation. Anyway, I just wanted to inform you about this. Now, please enjoy my conversation with Jesper Madsen. Last summer, I spent quite some time writing an essay, an in-depth essay that I thought would be great to have published in some newspaper or magazine in Sweden. It was about what I and many others think will be the next big evolutionary leap in humankind's history, namely the leap inward, where we finally delve into the non-physical aspects of who we are, ourselves, and we begin realizing that what we today call paranormal phenomena are, in fact, very normal phenomena. And my text had many references to scientists and scientific studies. So what happened? Well, I got a couple of decent no's from papers, but there was one magazine that was interested. But the editor wanted to cut out about half the text, particularly some parts in the beginning that were a bit esoteric and poetic. And he also said to me that I think you haven't sufficiently taken into account China's reaction to this change. And then he also asked me if I had smoked mushrooms. So now this kind of reaction is what you often meet in mainstream media when you want to investigate topics that are outside the mainstream narrative, the mainstream scientific narrative, in the Western world at least, especially when you try to bridge science and spirituality. It's very difficult to get articles published about these things unless you write them in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way, kind of ironic or so. Now, one person whom I asked to read my essay and whom I got a lot of wise advice from concerning this essay is my guest today, a fellow journalist and friend. Welcome to the show, Jesper Madsen.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, Anders. Yeah, and I have to tell you, I have some mushrooms in my fridge, but
okay.
They don't have any impact at all. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's very strange.
From the supermarket.
Okay. Well, maybe it's not the right kind then. I have to ask you first. You weren't very surprised when you heard about my experience with this essay, were you?
No, not really. I didn't have the same experience, but I know the attitude and the mindset of the editors. So no, it's no surprise here in Denmark.
Yeah. Yes, you're in Denmark. You live outside Aarhus on
exactly.
Jutland. Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. I was thinking we should start in that end and have you tell us a little bit more about your background, your yourself and your personal journey. I mean, why did you become a journalist and a communicator in the first of all?
Oh yeah. In the beginning, I wanted to be. After graduating, I wanted to be an electronic engineer.
Mm.
I don't know why, but all the technical stuff was really something I thought. But then, for some reason, I took a break from thinking about education, and some years after, I decided that I want to write and tell stories, to be a journalist, and yeah.
You told me in my pre-interview form here that you something happened in the Navy when you were in the Navy. Is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was in the Navy, and because what else should I do? I didn't think about. I didn't consider being a what do you call it? The Americans called it draft dodger, someone who doesn't want to join the Navy or the Army. But I didn't think of that, so I found myself in the Danish Navy for 17 months, and it was not a bad experience. I like to be on the sea, but still, I think people were crazy in there, the officers, and I had so much time to think. So after this, I decided to study movies at the university.
Mm.
Movies and television, I think it was
Okay.
called. And after a while, a lot of things happened, and then I, decided to be a journalist. But talking about my travel as just as a human, I was when I was a boy, I think I thought all these the UFOs and ghosts and anything mystical. I was reading about it, cartoons and books and whatever. And I think a lot of people are doing that, of course. And but I can remember that my father, he was telling me a strange story way back in the, I don't know, the 60s maybe. Anyway, he was a telegraphist. And so I was learning how to use the Morse code.
Mm-hmm.
When my father was holding my hand, he was pressing my hand, doot, 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 doot. So that's how I learned to do this. But he had a friend and a colleague who was employed at a ship. My father was not. He was on the ground most of the time in the airport. But this man, he was at the ship called Hans Hedtoft. Anyway, in 1959, the ship was on its way back from Greenland to Denmark, and with this man on board. And after that, the ship went down. Oh, yeah, that's the important point. Everybody died. Some time afterwards, my father had was told this story about the man's family. In the middle of the night, 3:30 in the morning, their dog began barking and going crazy. It was going wild. And, oh, shut up. We want to sleep. And it showed that exactly at that time, the ship went down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So that's one of the stories I never forget, because I was a boy, but it made I can feel still now it made quite an impression on me to hear about this. Of course, also because the man died. But anyway, if we are going along with my travel, in the 80s there was this new wave of psychology, psychiatry, therapy. And everybody all of a sudden was reading Stanislav Grof.
Yeah.
and about
Czechoslovakian psychologists who got in really deep into these esoteric things.
he was writing books about his LSD therapy, which of course was forbidden some years after. But anyway, he's still going strong. But that was quite interesting. And and some years after, I had a girlfriend who was a psychologist, and we started reading, for example, David Bohm, the famous quantum
physicist,
and and we had some very good experiences and talking about all this stuff and reading books and talking about books. And I don't remember exactly when, but then I bought my Bible, and of course a lot of things has been written since then. But I'll show it to you. I think it's primary of interest for the Scandinavian audience. It's called Behind Time and Space, Bag Tid og Rum in Danish, written by Erik Damman, a Norwegian journalist. And this guy was taking a trip around the world, so to speak, talking to all the important people, so to speak, at that time. For example, David Bohm, and it really blew my mind. I think that was the basic start for me to go into this.
Field. So this was in the 80s. This book came out in the 80s also, or
80s, or I'm not sure. I think. Oh, I cannot tell when it was written. Wait a minute. Here it is. 1989. In Norway, I think. Yeah.
I never heard of that book, actually. I mean, I'm a Swede, so I should have heard of it because it has a Scandinavian context. But anyway, I was going to ask you about where your interest came from in investigating, as you call it, frontier science. But it seems to me as if this influence is an ongoing thing. It's not, you can't say that it was just one incident or one event that made you take that course, but it has been with you since you were a kid, basically, and you've been more and more interested in these things.
And in that made me think more about it, and I had the opportunity to get some money from my union to go to to take a trip to San Francisco in 1996, because it seemed that all the interesting people were somehow gathered
in California,
in this area, in the Bay Area. I spent, I think, 5 weeks, which was prolonged to 7 weeks in San Francisco, and talking to a lot of very wise and interesting people, and including a trip to the IONS, the Institute of Noetic Science, in north of San Francisco.
You're affiliated to IONS. I understand. You're affiliated to IONS in some way.
Yeah, some way. Yeah, that's the more recent part of the story.
I'm
in connection with those people. Yeah,
we can come back to that. But back to 1996.
And I went back to Denmark with a lot of notes about this trip, and it was hard for me as a new young journalist to find out what to do with this, because, as we were talking about, the media are not really interested. But anyway, in 97, I succeeded to have a small article in a mainstream Danish newspaper about our scientific worldview, about the paradigm. So, with a Danish source. So So that was okay, but
that's the one and only piece that you have gotten published that is exactly about this topic, is it?
yeah, exactly. As about talking about science and the paradigm shift, that is the only one. It's 20 years ago or 30 or whatever. And
and then you've been dealing with, I mean, the last 20 years, as far as I understand, you've been focusing on alternative and complementary medicine. Is that right?
Exactly, because as I said, it was difficult to find out what to do with all this, with my interest and with all my notes. And all of a sudden, I found myself at a meeting with a researcher, a sociologist from Denmark, and a Danish medical doctor, and they were talking about alternative medicine. And I say, okay, this is somehow connected to what we are talking about, because it's in general, you can say, and most of it is based on the Eastern way of thinking, which is again connected to, as I see it, connected to the possible paradigm shift of science. So anyway, I decided to start writing about this, and I've been doing this since then. And of course, it's a hobby and interest, and also, thank God, it has been a part of my work and my income.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now somehow the last couple of years, I feel like going back to the start, so to speak.
The basic big questions.
Go back to the big questions. I don't want to spend the rest of my life writing about only alternative medicine.
No.
Even if it's okay and it's a good subject.
Maybe it's a little bit less controversial. It's easier to write about this body-focused topics like alternative medicine than it is to write about, for instance, near-death experiences or remote viewing or something like that. So it's easier to get things published that are about medicine, even if it's alternative medicine.
Well, it's in some way it's easier, but that's we could make a whole
podcast about
that. But the media's attitude towards alternative medicine in my country is very. It's a sad story. The journalists really don't know what they are writing about, and they, if a medical doctor says this is true, they believe him.
Whatever they say.
Yeah, whatever they say, and this it's this mumbo jumbo, this alternative, because you cannot prove that it works, etc., etc. Yeah,
but you can really. I mean, there are so many studies being done, but they're not taken seriously.
No, and the doctors only recognize one method, the double-blinded controlled trial, and this has to be done if you have to use this method if you want to prove that some treatment is working, and that this is a lie nobody cares about, because you cannot say that in science, if you want to have valid information about is this working or is it not working, you have to choose the best method in each case. If you say that the guarantee of valid information depends on only one method, then it's a question of your belief.
Yeah.
And I love to tell this to the doctors, because they say that alternative medicine, it works because you believe in it. So
it's the same thing, yeah.
It's the same thing. Your RCT methods, they are the best because you believe that.
I just came to think about some part, interesting part of that, and I mentioned it in my essay as well. I mean, while we're talking about it, the placebo effect, which has to do with this, and the nocebo effect, which they're talking about now also. I mean, placebo effect meaning that you get well from just believing that you're getting an active pill, an active medicine treatment, but you might be given a sugar pill instead, but you still get well. And the nocebo effect is the opposite, then, that if you believe that you have ingested something that is poisonous or bad for you, you will feel bad even if it's just a sugar pill as well. So what does mainstream medicine say about these things? Because it's a known fact. I mean, the placebo effect is well known and well studied, and it's strong. It's in some cases, I think, when it comes to the painkillers, for instance, I think the placebo effect is up to 60% or something. 60% of the people getting sugar pills say that they experience less pain. So what do the mainstream doctors say about this?
Well, of course, you have to ask them, but but in my
Have you
view,
written about this? Sorry, I'm interrupting, but have you written about this in your work as an alternative medicine?
I did, and I also made an interview with a placebo expert. I was present when she was defending her doctor. What's her name?
Thesis.
Her doctor thesis. So and she was quite interesting because she was digging deep into the placebo question, and she also told me that we had to go deeper into this. What is placebo? What is the mechanism? It of course is a psychosomatic question, and a lot of doctors recognize that. But when it comes to alternative medicine, they use the word placebo just to rule it out.
Yeah.
That is just a nasty word. Oh, it's all placebo.
Yeah, I know.
So then they don't want to go into the details. One of the things she told me that in some controlled trials that she had controlled, so to speak, it was a good protocol, and you had the placebo group and you had the other group, and they didn't know which they would get, the placebo or the real pill or whatever, the real treatment. But the thing was that a lot of the people she interviewed, they knew exactly if they had the placebo or the real thing. They knew. So somehow the blinding process was
flawed.
Well, yeah, it was gone. There was not really a blinding. So it's much more complicated than most people think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking that, I mean, to me, it's obvious that the placebo effect shows that we have powers within ourselves, that we can heal ourselves to a much larger extent than we have understood so far, and that's the point here. So that's why I was asking about it.
Of course, and the interesting question is that if you try to make a study on acupuncture or healing or whatever, you somehow should use different methods. You might use also the controlled trial, but as I said before, this controlled trial is not God. You cannot use it as the only valid tool. That is just stupid talking about science. But even if you do that, if you as a doctor don't understand or don't recognize the thinking behind this treatment, the best example, of course, is homeopathy.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense that some water with 0 molecules in it of the active ingredient, how could this work? It's a mumbo jumbo, they say. And I understand them somehow, because we are living in a world of molecules, and if they are not there, there's nothing. That's what we are told, at least.
Exactly.
So we have right now we are having a fight in the media between some brave scientist who wants to do homeopathy research, and has got some funding, and they are just going crazy.
Yeah,
this should not be happening in Denmark, and this is bullshit, etc. So I decided to call him and say, hey, we have to. I want to support you if I can, but it's a difficult one in Denmark.
Mm.
But just before this interview, I was reading in this Bible, as I
Yeah.
call it, and it was very interesting because he is talking about a physicist called John Taylor. Well, this is many years ago, of course. John Taylor in London. He was a skeptic, but anyway, he was participating or maybe even setting up a controlled study about bending metal.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
like Uri Geller.
The Uri Geller story.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And he was concluding that this might be interesting because his theory was that the electromagnetic waves from the person
Mm-hmm.
could have an influence on in the physical world, so to speak, on the metal.
Yeah.
That was his theory.
That's interesting.
But then, this is the interesting point. But then he later on found out that with his knowledge of electromagnetism, this could not have happened. So because of that, he concluded that that the bending of the metal had not taken place. It was impossible.
Had not occurred. I mean, it was obvious that you could see that it was bent. Couldn't you?
But because the point is that if you might have all this discussion about how to make the study and placebo and control groups, but still, if the explanation of the mechanism behind which is stated by the alternative practitioners, we have a theory who says so and so, and if this theory is if this seems to be crazy,
if it contradicts the narrative, so
if it contradicts the narrative, or at least seems to be totally way out, then why should you start doing research? That's a way of thinking.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand the basic mechanism, which might be beyond your scientific view, of course, if you don't understand that, then you should not do the research.
It's extremely unscientific, actually, to think that way. Because
it is because if this has been the attitude in science all the time, then we would not be discussing at Zoom, but we will still sit around the fire.
Exactly.
Because no progress would have been made.
Yeah, I know. It's like if you don't understand the problem from the beginning, you shouldn't study it. That's the baseline here.
Then you stop caring about if it works or not. That seems to be less relevant, because if this mechanism is not valid in your view, then you shouldn't care about anything. And the thing is that no scientist, as far as I know, has been mapping all the aspects of water, of the nature of water. It has not been fully investigated, and there's a lot of things going on to deal with this. But that's a long story. I'm not an expert.
Yeah, but it seems very basic, but it's true what you're saying, because I mean I'm now reading a very interesting book about body heat, and it's called The Body Heat Fiasco. And this author, I will also speak to him on the podcast later. He has come to the conclusion that the reason why the body keeps its heat is that because air is squeezed into the lungs, and when you compress air, according to the gas laws, it heats up.
Yeah.
Heats up. And the explanation why human beings have body heat, I mean 36.9 degrees constantly, has since the 1800s been that there are some chemical processes going on, but they don't really know. And this is really, it's scandalous really that we don't know more about this. It says in the textbooks some very vague things about chemical processes that are doing this, that are creating the heat in the body. But this is a very straightforward explanation, and he goes to length to explain why this is very, very easy to understand. If you see it this way, it makes much more sense. And this is also considered mumbo jumbo. But it's really the other thing that is mumbo jumbo. It's really mumbo jumbo to say that there is some kind of chemical process we don't know exactly. It could be in the cells, it could be here, it could be there. But this is in the textbook. So, talking about water, I actually interviewed also a guy.
Excuse me, but talking about this about the body heat,
yeah,
maybe they should talk to Wim Hof.
Wim Hof is mentioned in the book. In the book. Yeah, it's one chapter is about Wim Hof, and I knew a little bit about him before, but now I know more. And this is also exactly what's happening. He's using breathing technique to keep his heat. So it all makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that mainstream science knows so little about so basic things. And also water, as you mentioned. I interviewed a guy who is also a homeopath, Carl Moore. He's not famous or anything, I think, but he's a friend of mine, and he's a fellow podcaster. He's also a homeopath. And he taught me a lot about the properties of water, and the properties and the faculties of water that are very little known. And it has to do with the vibration and vortices in the water. If the water is circulating or is there are water vortices, it has different properties than if it's still and things like that. And it interacts with the material that it has around it, and all sorts of things. It does all sorts of things. And we are 65% water or 70% water, so it would make sense then that water would be able to have some impact on our health and our bodies. So homeopathy might be flawed in the sense that they think that this active molecule does something, but maybe it's just the water, and that's good enough. So maybe they shouldn't be talking about these active ingredients. Homeopaths should only be talking about water and what water does.
Well, yeah, but it has. They say that it has a kind of memory, so it can remember these ingredients somehow. Because
that's true.
Otherwise, it would not really. It would be the same treatment for everyone if there was nothing. So
that's true. They have the memory.
Yeah.
That you said that. I forgot that. But that's an important aspect, that they say that the water remembers what it has been.
Yeah.
With, yeah.
But talking about the conservative scientists and the conservative media, of course, I had some kind of support by way of thinking, which I was really not expecting, because, I could meet an open-minded scientist and an open-minded editor, but this support was coming from somewhere else. You see, one of the people I met in San Francisco, he was called Ed May, or Edwin C. May. He was a physicist originally, and the year before I met him, he stopped, or had to stop a project which had been running for 20 years. So now he could talk about this project. So I think you can guess what I'm thinking about. But anyway, it was called Stargate. It was a top secret CIA project, because they assumed that the Russians was using people with psychic abilities in their military programs. So they said to themselves, we should do the same. And it was true, the Russians did that. Anyway, for 20 years, they were working with remote viewing and also other techniques, but primarily remote viewing, and had some quite good results. Maybe I have to explain that if I'm sitting here and you are somewhere in Sweden, then I should try to close my eyes and say, I see Anders.
And we can assume that Zoom is not on then.
Zoom is not on. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, I have to in my mind, if I have this ability, I would be able to tell that you are at a bridge in the middle of Stockholm or whatever, and I can see not exactly like as a picture, but some signs on where you are and some shapes and other things. That's what they did with military purposes, and then that was in 1996, and then for I think about maybe 3 years ago, 2 years, I don't know, I found this business card from Ed, the CIA guy, and I wrote him an email. It might work, this old email, and it did. And he answered me, "Yes, time flies," he was writing, and we had a little mail conversation. But what happened in between, which reminded me of Ed, was that again, some years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I don't remember, I discovered a book which I instantly bought on Amazon, which is called ESP Wars, East and West. And what happened after the Iron Curtain was crumbling down in '89 was that these CIA people, they got on a flight to Moscow. They had an appointment with their old enemies in KGB, and who was doing the same research. And well, I think they became friends, it seems so. And I always tell the story about they shared some bottles of vodka, but I don't know if it's true.
Well, it seems like
that's what you do to your guests if you want to be polite in Moscow. Anyway, and they don't pour water in. Why should they? But anyway, they decided to write a book together, and I must say that I've been reading a lot of very exciting books about crimes and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't stop reading, and this was
even more
one.
exciting.
It was more exciting, I can tell you. I want to tell you a long story about this book, but and you can find something about this also on
what is the title?
The title is, I don't have it here, but the title is ESP Wars, East and West. ESP is extrasensory perception.
Yeah.
And they do not only write about what they did, they also go back in time to the Egyptians and way back in history, to show that everyone had somehow used psychics. And Hitler and also
yes, it's been used.
Actually, it's been quite normal.
Yeah.
So it's interesting in many ways. So
good reading tip there.
Yeah, I can really recommend.
Okay.
And
yeah, you want to say some more about that before we?
Well, not really, but of course, I like to see this guy to some great event here in Scandinavia, but he's quite busy.
I can understand that. Yeah.
But
okay, let's talk a little bit about the media and problems with media. And I have a quote here first because as a segue or something, I don't know. I visited IONS's website, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Noetic is a very strange word, actually. I had to look it up. It actually means
an old Greek word.
I know, and it has to do with intellect and mind, which made me a little bit skeptical too. I mean, they are, well, it's about mind, of course, but it's about spiritual things also. And noetic doesn't really mean it. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. So I was checking out IONS website, and I saw this quote from a guy who is now taking over, I think, Albert Einstein's place as the go-to scientist when you want to find a cool quote, because people have been attributing anything to Albert Einstein. Any wise thing that has been said has been attributed to Albert Einstein. Yeah. But I think Nikola Tesla is taking over his role now.
Oh yeah,
Tesla is
yeah, really.
very common these days. And there was a Tesla quote, but I've seen it before, and I think it's actually accurate. Tesla says that the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it's
Do
a
you think he's
great
right?
quote.
Do you think he's right when he says that?
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny thinking about Tesla, and everybody's talking about Tesla when they want to buy a car. Yeah. And but talking about IONS, I realized that they on their website that they had local groups, study circles, supporters, fans, whatever you call them, but some local groups which has no legal connection, but just affiliated with. And there was no group in Denmark, so I made one in 18. Yeah, it was settled like in 19, and we even managed to have some meetings face to face before the corona. So
that's your affiliation with IONS, that you started a group in Denmark.
So we have a small group discussing all these interesting things, and one of my goals still is to go out from this group with, or some of us from the group should write something in the media or make some events, or to try to push the agenda a little bit. But we didn't do that yet, I must say, and this has partly because of the corona, it has made some. Even if we have Zoom, a lot of things are not moving so fast. But it's a very good little circle, and as far as I remember, there should be a group in Stockholm and Oslo, I think.
Okay, I'll check that out.
I'm not sure, but they have a. You have to look for community groups. Then you will have a map of the entire world.
Yeah.
But most of the groups are in the US.
Yeah, I know. I understand. So anyway, you talked a little bit about your experiences when it comes to trying to convey these more esoteric, non-physical aspects of science in mainstream media. And you mentioned that you have you have had an article published which is about exactly this basic topic, that is that there is a non-physical reality out there. But what do you think? But other than that, you've had some troubles with it. You explained. What do you think is the problem in the mainstream media with this? What is the reason for this reluctance to accept these kinds of articles?
I think the reason number one is the power of the scientific establishment. Most people, including editors and politicians, they don't see science as a part of politics. Like a lot of people have not been considering the church, for example, as a political factor for centuries, which it has always been since the birth of Jesus or before. So they consider science as God somehow. And I cannot come up with any quotes, but I think I've been reading different wise people saying this sentence, that we have put science in the place of God. And of course, people know that scientists often they don't agree about the climate, they don't agree about this or that, but the basic principles in science, and those who really also have economic implications, they are not questioned. And if the parliament in some country want to decide about health, for example, that's what I know most about, they go to the medical doctors to get advice, and not to any doctor, but to those doctors who are in in power on top of the pyramid, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the doctors connected to the public health system. And this is the truth for the that's what the politicians, that's what their experience
and
is.
the media goes with that, so to speak. They
and the medias are
the
doing the same things. They ask the politicians, and then if they want to go deeper, they also ask some professor at the university who's a medical doctor, and then they got the truth. If it comes to really fundamental questions, there's no second opinion. And besides that, someone have succeeded to label people who, for example, are studying near-death experiences and bending metal, whatever. And if you are dealing with that as a scientist, you are doing pseudoscience.
Yeah. Pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience.
They're using.
Yeah. And exactly like today, I have to say, if you go against the narrative about the corona, even as a scientist, you are a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
And using labeling people with words like these, I know it's of course it's a different case, but making this label will end all discussion. And as a journalist, if you call one of these people with a label, then and make an interview with him, then you are contaminated with the same label.
Yeah.
So then, as a journalist, you don't dare to do this, because even if you have the idea, what would the other journalist and the editor say?
Yeah.
Are you crazy? Are you also get a conspiracy theorist or pseudoscience or whatever? So that's
it's a cruel system, because it's like catch-22. You can't get out of it.
Yeah, it's really a catch-22. And this about thinking out of the box, this is not really upfront these days.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. I mean, we are, and there are a lot of people who are doing it, but it's kind of like the polarization is intensifying a little bit, because I mean, possibly because we are communicating so much, and everything that is being said is up on the surface nowadays. You know, you can hear. I mean, like you were mentioning this pandemic thing, and the discussion about vaccinations is. I mean, it's impossible for the powers that be to completely quash that discussion, to silence it, because I mean, some ways it pops up, it seeps up to the surface, so everyone can see that there is a discussion going on out there. But then, as you say, there are those people who don't want to take the vaccine. They're labeled anti-vaxxers and pseudoscientists and all that. But still, I mean, there is a knowledge about a discussion going on, which perhaps wasn't there 30 years ago, 40 years ago. You didn't even know that there were people.
No, we didn't have social media.
No, we didn't know about all the opinions that were out there. Sometimes maybe you met some person on a train who spoke strangely, who said strange things to you, and that was wacko. You might have thought, but then you forgot all about it. But now you see these, and I mean, I don't mean that they're wackos, but I just mean that it's very good for us all to know that there are all kinds of different aspects and angles and opinions about everything, and we have to take that into account. So, that was a
you're quite right, and we were talking about.
This is the problem with the media, that the journalists are afraid. They're not intrepid. They're afraid that they will be ostracized if they bet on the wrong horse, so to speak.
Exactly, because the other explanation is that all the journalists, they are not able to think out of the box. They're too stupid. I mean, this is not the case, of course. There are many very clever journalists around in Denmark and Sweden and worldwide. So
maybe they suspect that they should be writing something different, but they don't dare. But there was another aspect that I've been thinking a lot about and also writing about and talking about on the podcast, and is that I have the impression that news media, especially news media, is not as independent as they often claim to be, and that has not only to do with their independence towards science, but independence towards any structure in society. Some people call it the Matrix. This film, The Matrix. It's a documentary, they say, which has some. I think it has something going for it to say that. But anyway, news media is not independent from the powers that be. Be it mainstream science, be it the government, be it the corporate world. It's not independent. And I thought it was independent when I became a journalist. In the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. I thought that it's a proud profession, because we tell the truth and we speak for the people, and we have we're all independent. But I came to realize that that's not really the case. There are some rules written on the walls it's not written on the walls, but it's in the walls. It's written between the lines. You can't do certain things. You don't write about certain things. You don't ask certain questions, and nobody says it, but you can feel it in a way. It's in the air.
Yeah.
So it's not independent, and the government is also, these big newspapers, the mainstream newspapers in Sweden, for instance, and the radio and the television, they're statists, so to speak. We say in Swedish statsbärande. The media is carrying the state power along with the state, so to speak. It's not independent from it. It's kind of in the same loop. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, some of us, at least in Denmark, we think that the big news media, like the Danish Broadcast Corporation, for example, and the big newspapers, they have been a PR agency for the government during the entire Corona period. Yeah. Once in a while, of course, they have some discussions with some critics, but basically they promote the narrative, and nobody has really questioned this. Is this what they should do? Okay, well, that's okay if they should do it, but if they deny and keep on telling that they are just making journalism, and this is not true anyway. So I think a lot of them might feel bad about it, but of course they don't want to lose their job, because it's really a massive PR task they have been doing.
Yeah. And the pressure is heavy on individual journalists.
I think so. Yeah.
Oftentimes.
But well, it's just a guess. I have not been employed there, so I couldn't tell. But seen from the outside, it looks very strange, because they tell the same story, all of them.
They do. They boast, they brag about being so independent, and sometimes they for instance, they can topple a minister or something because they have found that the minister has been bribed or so, and that's true. Yeah. They can do that, but that's just a single example of what they can do, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect the story.
No, not really. Yeah,
but they can show that this shows that we are independent. Look at us. We toppled this minister. But then it just continues as business as usual. And when it comes to the big issues, like, as you say, the pandemic, and also migration, the climate, terrorism, all these big questions, they very, very soon follow suit. They follow the government very, very closely. There can be some discussion at the beginning, for instance, when the migration wave came here to Sweden and Denmark, also in 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. Then I know, for instance, the paper that I was working at the time, Dagens Nyheter in Stockholm, it almost campaigned for the migrants, for the refugees. So it was, they really took a stand that we have to help these people. But then the government switched foot, very clearly. Very from black to white almost overnight. Later that fall, and then it just took a few weeks, and then Dagens Nyheter was also in that loop.
It was switching too, yeah.
Yeah, they switched too. It was almost, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, okay, so the government doesn't like what we're saying. Okay, we just do what the.
You want some coffee?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Well, maybe in 10 or 20 years, I could transmit that through the link. Maybe.
Yes.
Who knows?
Who knows? Anything is possible. So,
but talking about the public service media, I have the good thing, the good side of it, that within the past 15, 20 years, 3 times at least in the Danish on the Danish TV channels, the big ones, we have some small series of frontier science. Actually, I know the guy who made this, and he was interviewing all the interesting people, so to speak, doing research on for example, near-death experiences. And he interviewed Pim van Lommel from the Dutch medical doctor who has been talking about this and published
on my podcast as well.
Yes, I remember. So I talked to him, and he said, "Yeah, I did this, but I really had to fight to get it recognized by the editor." And he had a hard time because everything should be so 100% well researched and documented. And of course it should be, but this was about, he should do it like 120%.
And that doesn't go for that doesn't go for mainstream science stories.
No,
they can
you
be
can just say anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But so they had these episodes on the Danish television, or was it?
Yeah, on Danish television. One of them at the Danish broadcasting, the old Denmark's radio, as we call it, and like you have SVT.
Yeah.
And the other one is TV2 in Denmark, but that's the other big channel. And so this was okay, and I think a lot of people like this. And if you go to different magazines, you will see some personal stories about their near-death experiences. People are even some well-known people, kändisar, as you say in Swedish.
Yeah.
Even some of those have come forward and told their stories. But the funny thing is that, this is interesting. Everybody thinks it's very, whoa, they did this. But science just doesn't care. Nobody wants to dig into this. So there's a paradox between what the scientists are doing or thinking maybe, and on the other hand, that 2 out of 3 Danes are stating that there is more between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
And this was a survey from 7 years ago, I think. So people, they know that something is happening. And I have a suspicion that a lot of Danish people really have some great or maybe also unpleasant experiences. I don't know. In the paranormal category.
Yeah.
But they don't want to talk about it because they know that this cannot happen. You are crazy if you start telling about this. Not about near-death experience, because it's so well documented now, I think.
Yes, now, but I mean, that was the case with near-death experiences also 20, 30, 40 years ago. I've read a lot about that. People who had these experiences, they never talked about it because they thought they might be crazy or this can't be true. But then as more and more books were published about it and more programs were recorded about it, they could see that, I'm not the only one. So they started talking. So now, today, it's, as you say, not that controversial.
That's that's the reason I somehow I'm more interested in some of the magazines, even if you can say a lot of bad things about this. popular magazines which have a lot of stories about people who are famous for no reason and whatever. But still, they are the ones who want to write about stuff like that, and people read it. So I don't mind that they are the ones.
No, that's true. They're actually in the front line.
Somehow they are.
Somehow they are on the front line there, which is interesting. So anyway, you and I, we got to know each other in connection with the so-called Galileo Commission. It's an initiative sprung from the Scientific and Medical Network, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And it aims to, as it says on the website, I'll read it directly here, to open public discourse and to find ways to expand science so that it can accommodate and explore important human experiences and questions that science in its present form is unable to integrate. In short, to encourage investigations beyond the materialist worldview. So, and you are engaged in this commission. I am very briefly so also, but you are more so. So in what way are you engaged in the Galileo Commission?
Well, I approached them about a year ago, I think, because I stumbled over the Galileo Commission by incident, I think. But maybe it was way back on some website at IONS. I don't remember. Anyway, I thought it was interesting, and I found out that one of my old acquaintances, psychologist and whatever, he's more than that, Harald Wallach, or Wallach, he's somehow German and English. Yeah, I know he is German, but he has been working in both languages. He was, I met him because of this research in complementary medicine, and all of a sudden I found out that he was the main author of the big report of the Galileo Commission. And so first I wrote him, and then I wrote David Lorimer, who is like in charge, so to speak. And then I suggested that we would somehow make it easier for journalists worldwide to learn from each other and to find out how to have some debate and to get the message out that science was not only the materialistic concept. So, and then I have been involved on and off for a year, and we decided to start a network of open-minded journalists. And it didn't really start yet, but it will, I hope, within a month or two, I hope. So, because my idea was that cooperation between journalists, networking between journalists in different countries, which of course has different situations regarding the media and science, but still we could learn from each other and maybe help each other or do something like a joint venture or writing an article. I don't know. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm so curious about what is happening in other countries, talking about media and science.
Yeah. How do you think that journalists, I mean, considering what we have just been talking about and the problems concerning journalists who want to break the mainstream but don't dare because they fear to be ostracized, how do you think you can go about here to make journalists more open-minded, to dare to talk about these things?
Well,
question, I
to
guess.
make them, first of all, we are trying to address the people who are open-minded.
Yeah.
We are trying to find them, and this is quite a task in itself. But still, I understand your question. How can we make other journalists open-minded and curious? I think as a journalist, you should be curious, but still it has some limitations. I can see that. I think that would depend on the journalist environment in each country. Actually, I didn't really have these considerations until you are asking me, but
yeah, well, I can understand that. As you say, you start by connecting with those who are already open-minded and who I mean, they are not very many, but there are a few. But then from there, maybe you can go further, and you have a bigger network, and it's easier to detect maybe if there are any other people out there who might be interested, and then maybe you reach a threshold, critical mass, when enough journalists are daring to write about these things, that maybe a lot of others also realize that, okay, this is
well, I must say I'm really relying on countries like Great Britain and the US and Germany, because in Denmark, I mean, like 6 million people and a newspaper or media world where everybody knows everybody, it's very, very hard to change anything. But if I could find just 3 other journalists in Denmark, then it would be a start. Then we could we could arrange an interesting event for other journalists. I don't know. So, but the problem is that when I find an article in a Danish magazine, for example, about near-death experiences, usually it's some young journalist who wrote this story, and this is interesting, quite whoa, this is way out of what I'm usually writing about, and then they continue doing their usual work. So it was not, the story was not born out of an interest in this, but it was interesting for them because it was unusual. So what I mean by saying this is that I don't think I will find more than maybe 1 or 2 or 3, including myself, in Denmark, because if they were there, I would have heard about it in this small country. And if you write something in Danish, it will not have a big reach out, a big impact. That's the advantage of the English-speaking countries, that you have quite a possible
a big reach,
target group.
And as you say, I mean, it's, if you look upon it the other way around, you say that when you write something in Danish, it's within the Danish context, and everybody knows everybody, and it's nobody really dares to go out of their comfort zone. But if these things are written in big papers or media in the United States or in the United Kingdom, Danish journalists are looking at that and taking that into account and being impressed by that, and so then they can dare to perhaps start writing about it, because then they can point to the big American context or the big British context, which makes it easier, of course. But also we have these new technologies and these communication tools now, so we can, I mean, like you and me now, you can communicate with people in other countries very easily, and you can find you can build up your journalist networks with other countries easily. So you don't have to be that, I mean, confined to the Danish context. Really, you can do it differently.
Yeah. That's one of the advantages of this electronic globalization, and partly because of the corona.
You said something before our interview also, that after the pandemic, you want to reach out to, I guess, meet in person scientists in, you mentioned the United States and also Russia, to, I guess, discuss these matters, these topics, these esoteric topics. Can you tell us more about that? What you're dreaming about doing there?
Yes, of course, it's a dream, but it's no secret that I like to, or I can't help doing it, talking to people about this and to researchers. And in Denmark, it's very hard to find a researcher with this kind of open-mindedness.
Yeah.
So, and after the corona, I'm assuming there soon will be an after. I would really like to also to talk to some of these people, not only at Zoom but in person, if possible. And if I one day have the possibility and the funding, I'd like to go to Russia, because in spite of what other things you hear about Russia, talking about research, they have not been so much influenced by mainstream, but what we call mainstream science. So what I have heard is that you don't meet this wall of rejection as a researcher if you approach a controversial issue in Russia.
So, to wrap this thing up now, we've been talking for a long time, and it's been very interesting, of course, all of it. Do you think we will see a paradigm shift away from materialism, the materialist worldview, in our lifetimes? The big question.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind if I can still think and write. I wouldn't mind turning 110, but I will probably not. I think it will take quite a long time, because there are so many obstacles. But there may happen things we cannot anticipate. Things happening in some country, and some changes which are not normal in science. Some event, I'm just fantasizing. But if it continues like this, with the established scientific community and a bunch of journalists and some researchers doing research on these things, I'm afraid it will not happen within the next 20 years. But of course I hope there will be changes, but as a shift which is recognized by a majority of scientists, it will take time. But I can only say I was doing a speech online speech some months ago, that I would like to continue what I'm doing in my next life. But the problem is, what about my documents? Is there some kind of cloud storage, quantum cloud storage, where I could get them in my next life?
Well, the Akashic records are there, of course.
Oh yeah, I heard about it. They must be.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's where everything is stored. You know, every knowledge, all the knowledge, your knowledge and collective knowledge, it's all there.
Yeah, but I don't have an account there.
Well, it's easy. You just write down your email address and password. So, okay, Jesper Madsen, thank you so much for joining the show, and good luck with your efforts to shift and open minds out there.
Thank you, Anders, and good luck again with the minds shift. Yeah.
Thanks. Bye. If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. And you can follow Mind the Shift on Facebook and Instagram. And you can follow me, Anders Bolling, on all the main social media and also on medium.com. Thank you.